Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Atlassian Governance Practices webinar. I'm Bonnie Byer, and I'm a consultant with Valiantis. Um, my background is actually from avionics. I spent 20 some years in avionics in various activities of software engineering, systems engineering, project management, engineering management, all of the gamut. And then during my last 6 years there, I got thrown over the wall to shared services to manage the Atlassian tools modernization and the agile transformation. And I learned a lot there and had so much fun that I decided to become a consultant to do that for other companies. So that's who I am. Where I learned about Atlassian governance was during that time from some very smart people at Rockwell Collins who had some foresight into how to keep the tools from getting out of control. And so that's what I'm here to share with you today. So let's go ahead and jump in. A little bit about Valiantis. We are the #1 Atlassian Platinum Solution Partner globally. And we do have all of the practices, specializations, including cloud migrations, consolidations, and IT service management, agile at scale, and managed services. And we are the kind of organization that wants to help you with all of those activities in our value as a service offering, where we can actually come in and provide strategic advisory on how to best approach the different activities that need to be managed for your tools and for your process solutions. And so let's go ahead and get into the webinar itself. When I look at anything, I always ask the questions who, what, why, where, when, how. And so that's what we're going to focus in on is what is governance? Why do you care about governance? Who are the people that are involved? How do you do this? How do you get started? And then I'll get into a demonstration of what I would recommend for how you would document and manage your governance activities. So let's just jump into what is governance. Well, Wikipedia defines it as the process of making and enforcing decisions within an organization or a society. And really, we see governance in all aspects, all kinds of different aspects of our organizations, whether it's our software development practices or configuration management procedures. There's lots of processes when it comes to an avionics safety critical development environment. We had all kinds of processes that had to be governed. Then there's also scope control, the dreaded change control board that needs to decide what scope is in and what scope is out. And I'm sure all of that is changing constantly with the way the agile transformations are looking at how scope can be managed over time. But there still are those trade-offs and prioritizations that are happening in that scope control. IT historically has great governance over their enterprise tools. And so IT is often a great model for the Atlassian tools. The challenge comes in that Jira and Confluence have often entered into an organization through engineering. And engineering really cares about getting their job done. They don't really think about the governance over the tools. They just, set up the tools, use them, but they're focused on their real work of developing the products that they're delivering to their customers. And then eventually IT ends up taking over ownership of the Atlassian tool suite. And that's when they find out, oh, we have a problem. Will Robinson, let's figure this out. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the governance that we care about when it comes to the Atlassian products. I tend to think of things in terms of the 3 pillars: people, practices, and tools. And so when it comes to governance with people, you want to make sure that you understand that what their roles and responsibilities are for that governing board. And you also have to have good representation of the admins, the people that own the solution and have to take accountability for managing the system and paying for the system, as well as the end users. You want to have end users involved in that governance. And the tools themselves. What are the tools that we are governing? Is it Jira? Is it Confluence? Does it include Bitbucket or Git or Jenkins or any of the other tools that you're managing with your Atlassian tool suite? And you'll end up wanting to have a knowledge base that's associated with that for your enablement. And then the practices, you want to talk about what are the best practices? How do we implement our engineering activities, our project management activities, our business activities, our service activities, so that we can document those in our knowledge base as guidance for our people. This is how we use the tools for how we do things at our company, because every company is a little bit different. There is no one size fits all solution. And so you want to document and enable people in how you want those tools used for your organization. And so, why do we care about governance? Well, without governance, it makes it very difficult for us to get the value out of the tools that we really want to see. We want to be able to track that full development lifecycle across the toll gate processes for all of the initiatives. We want to be able to measure those flow metrics, and we want to have automations in that system. We want to improve the visibility for the scope, for dependencies, for risks, for anything that needs to be escalated. And we want to improve that operational visibility and collaboration by providing that guidance and the right level of standardization so that we can have that good data map. I sometimes think about Rosie the robot. And if I wanted Rosie the robot to cook dinner and clean up the kitchen afterwards, she's got to have a good map of my kitchen, of where the silverware is, where the dishes are, where the produce, where the canned goods are, and where the vacuum or broom and dishwasher are. She has to have that map, or she's not going to be able to be effective at, and who knows what we're going to have served for dinner. So it is kind of a garbage in, garbage out situation when it comes to these tools, not just in terms of the data entry from the people, but in terms of that mapping. And that's part of what this governance activity is truly about, is building that map so you can build your automations and get great value out of the Atlassian tools. We have something called the Jira Hall of Fame at our organization. Do any of these sound familiar with your organization? Do you have dozens or hundreds of issue types? Do you have hundreds or thousands of custom fields? How many workflows are in your system, and how many statuses and schemes and your admins? If you have a slew of admins in the system, too many cooks in the kitchen are going to spoil the broth or the meal. So if you have any of these kinds of situations, you definitely probably need to look at implementing governance in your organization to try and wrangle it all under control. We often refer to this as the wild, wild west, or Franken-Jira is another common term, Franken-Jira. But the wild, wild west situation is very common, and it's not anybody's fault. It's just the nature of how a lot of people get started, and then they don't necessarily have all of the guidance or best practices and training that they need before they actually get themselves into that wild, wild west situation, and then they have to clean it up. So wherever you're at, that's it's just so common. And the Jira configuration, when we do a health check or when we review a system while we're building a solution design for maybe a ITSM service project, we might find out that, oh, their Jira is kind of out of control. And it's very easy for us to see because the configuration says a lot about what kind of configuration they have or what kind of governance they have. If every single project has its own issue type scheme and its own workflow scheme, then they very likely are getting out of control because all of these one-off solutions, which started out identical because they were built with those Atlassian templates, they start diverging and people start adding new statuses and new fields, often meaning the same thing, but just slightly different. Do they have several dozen issue types? Do they have multiple versions of the done status? I've seen So many different ways that people can express things are complete or were canceled. And those are my two favorite ending statuses, complete or canceled. But done, complete, canceled with one L, canceled with two L's. I've even recently seen an organization that had canceled with one L, canceled with two L's, and they had one called canceled killed, which I thought was funny. So those kinds of situations are things that you'll want to get cleaned up, and that's part of that governance activity as well, to define what is our end solution going to look like and how do we clean out the crud. Several dozen resolution values, hundreds of custom fields. Are your admins trained? Have they been trained not just in what they can do, but what should they do to keep the system from getting out of control? And do they have several dozen people with that admin permission? So if the answer to some of those questions is yes, then they probably need some governance over their system. And when we look at that wild, wild west configuration, sometimes I recently also saw one that was one of the best I've seen. So we see the full range, but whatever your small town or large city looks like, it probably has a little bit of wild, wild west in it. And every admin is always fighting that battle of trying to get it cleaned up. But it's hard to prioritize sometimes. But there are several other challenges that you want to look at with governance as well. Not just cleaning up that wild, wild west configuration, but also you want to address the permissions or security issues. Nothing can be worse than having something that's supposed to be FedRAMP or ITAR controlled getting access, and then you have to go through all of the audits and all of the I can't think of the word, all of the things that you have to do to show that this won't happen again. And then the end user confusion. Have you ever tried to build a JQL filter and you have to scroll through all of the different statuses and you don't know necessarily which ones to use? And same with the fields. That end user confusion can be really a big impact on your engineering teams or business teams' ability to be efficient. You don't want the tools to make things slower. You want it to make things easier, so enable them to be powerful employees. And so you want to eliminate that end user confusion. You also want to have a good path for your end user support. Do they know where to go for support? Do they know where they need to go if they need to ask a question or if they need a new Jira project, and what kinds of projects are available for them? Do they know where to go if they want to ask for training? So an end user support model is something that's pretty important for the governance board to think about. And then that admin training and that system cleanup, don't let that not be prioritized. The admins really do need that training that they can get. They can get it from Atlassian, which will provide them a lot of value. We also provide lots of Jira boot camps, Confluence boot camps, Jira service management, and all of those, where we teach not just what can you do, but what should you do? What are some of the best practices? And then after you've got governance established, that's when you can really start digging into the PMO solutions and agile support and what kind of extensions or automations you want for DevOps. That's when you can truly build upon that solid foundation that you have. But you can't build upon the wild, wild west as easily. It's very challenging. So I sometimes hear people come to us saying, we want Jira Align. We want a portfolio management solution. We want big picture. We want all of these things. But then when you get into their system, you find out, oh, we've got some problems we've got to address first. Otherwise, it's just not going to be successful. So build that good solid foundation so that you can build those extensions and get the full power of the solutions that Atlassian tools can provide. So how do you get started? Who's involved? Well, we like to recommend setting up your Atlassian Tools Governance Board. And I've seen all kinds of different names for these. Do you want to call it the Jira Governance Board? Do you want to call it the ALM Change Control Board? That's what we called it, Rockwell Collins. The Atlassian Tools Governance Board. When it comes to a company like Valiantis, since Atlassian is one of our key components of our business, calling it an Atlassian Tools Governance Board is kind of challenging because what does that really mean? So really think about what is that name going to be? And then for the membership, you want there to be somebody who's essentially the product owner. Whatever the title is, it might be an executive, it might be a project manager, it might be the person that's ultimately responsible for those tools. But that person is the person who's going to have the final decision-making authority and have responsibility for that governance board. They're typically the person that's driving the activity and making sure that the governance board is meeting regularly and discussing the issues that have to be discussed. You want to have your admins, or at least some admin representatives. They're going to be the ones that are going to provide estimates on how much effort this is going to be. They're going to be able to tell you details about what fields are in the system or what resolutions and how frequently those are used. They're the ones that are going to do some of that research to inform that governance board so they can make good decisions. And sometimes you'll have other integration support representatives as well, like maybe people that are managing the email systems or other IT systems that you want to integrate with. You might even have some of the process. Your agile transformation team might have a representative that's going to bring some of the process information in so that some changes can be made, perhaps in the workflows, to help address bottlenecks that they're identifying. And then you want to have your engaged representatives from across the organization, people that are actually using the tools, your project managers, your engineering teams, your subject matter experts. Sometimes these representatives can be rotated so that way it's not something that's a full-time job for anybody, and it might get stale or people's interests might vary. So rotating those on a 6-month basis or a yearly basis, so that way you're bringing in fresh new ideas and fresh new energy into the governance board. And one of the things that we often see is that there are some people that are strongly opinionated, and they built in this really great custom development with their workflows that they defined when it was the Wild Wild West, when you did have 200 different admins in the system or gave all kinds of extended permissions to those project admins. And so those are the people that you want to include in your governance board. Don't just call them the problem child. They're not the prima donna that you want to avoid. They're the ones, the experts that you want to bring in. They can help you build a good system, as long as they recognize that they need to consider they're going to learn some new things too, and they want to be flexible and do systems thinking of the entire system and organizing so that we can make it effective as a whole for the entire organization, not sub-optimizing for individual items. Not that we don't want to optimize for individual teams, and we can and should, but we do want to optimize for the whole as well. And so their activities, early on, they're going to need to establish what their mission is, their goals, and their practices, including what is the scope of their responsibility, what tools are they responsible for, what support models are they going to be responsible for. They're also going to need to identify and then implement, as well as document to a certain standard, to a certain amount, what is that Jira architecture that they're defining, that data mapping. What is the information that they need to be the handoff between the admins and the end users? Don't over document, but you don't want to recreate the entire Jira configuration in some sort of Confluence documentation. We tried many, many years ago at Rockwell Collins, and that was so silly and worthless in the end. So you just want to document the information that's needed for that handoff and for good communication between the different user types. And then after that architecture is baselined, the meetings will start backing off to about once a month, where they're going to review what are the change requests. Oh, we've got this new request. We really need a new field for change impact analysis. And then they might look through, the admins will look through the system and say, oh, but we have this impact analysis field that's already in the system. Would that be appropriate to reuse that field for this type of project? They'll want to review those change requests from good practices of not creating things just to create them, but also to think about what do we already have in the system and what is the need that we're trying to address. Why are they asking for this? What is the business case? Maybe there's a better way to do this. Maybe there's something that's already automatically included in the Atlassian tool suite to address this. Also, they're going to look at maintenance and end user support and upgrades, especially if you're in DC or server. You're going to have your regular upgrade schedule, and you're going to want to make sure that you're keeping tabs on when those should happen. Governance would be watching over that. Some of the maintenance activities might be how frequently are we refreshing our sandbox environment? When are we doing our backups, and what is our restore activities, and how do we grant access, and how do we create new projects? What information do we need for that? And so when those change requests come in, the board members do need to collaboratively consider all of the aspects of the change. I sometimes hear people say, oh, well, it's a free plugin, so let's just give it a try. We'll just install it in production and let people try it. There is no such thing as a free plugin, because every plugin comes with certain aspects, whether it's configuration aspects, because most plugins are going to insert some sort of configuration into your system. It might be new fields, it might be new issue types, link types, or even it might require certain workflows. And also, it's going to require enablement and support. Otherwise, what's the point of putting it into the system if the end users don't know how to use it? And so there is no such thing as a free plugin, because it does need to be managed and maintained, and it does impact your configuration, which is ultimately what governance wants to maintain control over. And so early on, you're going to get started. You're going to want to establish what is your governance vision. And I've got some samples here. For example, you want to ensure an ongoing balance between enterprise goals and enterprise growth via flexible controls managed by the employees who best understand the purpose and value of Atlassian products across the organization. You can use that if you like, or you can write one of your own, but you want to establish that vision up front with your governance board to say, okay, what are we truly trying to accomplish here? We're trying to control the wild, wild west, but just that isn't enough. We really want to understand what is it we want to support. And so their purpose, the governance body will support the creation, discussion, decision-making, and implementation of the Atlassian products, apps, components, and configuration. And some of that touches in on that scope. What is the governance board's scope of responsibility? Is it all of the Atlassian products and apps and components and configuration? Then yes, this is a great one for you to copy as well. All right. And then you're going to want to think about what are your governance goals and the components of that. And so we've got these goals right here in the center. We want scalable growth, visible control, user ownership, and knowledge sharing. And those goals will be supported by the governance board, and you might write some of your own goals as well. But we want to have a scalable system, so that way, as our organization is successful and grows, and we grow from 500 to 1,000 to 10,000 to 20,000 employees, we want to make sure that we can grow with it appropriately without having to have multiple refactors and migrations of data. So that way, we're not throwing money away. I mean, we don't want to throw money away as we grow. And so then these components of what we're managing are Jira, our source control, our portfolio tools, our guidance materials, our governing bodies. Perhaps there's other governing bodies that are involved as well. Our best practices, our policies, and even Confluence or the other tools. So you want to think about what are the different components of our Atlassian governance, as well as your goals. And as I said early on, you're going to want to establish your architecture. And there's certain architectural decisions that you have to make up front. What are the layers of scale? Do we have, are we just a 2-layer scale system where we have our Jira epics and then our stories and tasks, or whatever we're naming those? Team level and program level is typically what we think of if you're talking in a scaled agile framework or a scaled agile or any kind of scaled system. Or are we looking at multiple layers? Do we need to have, in scaled agile framework, they call it the capabilities above the feature level, or portfolio initiatives? Or do we also need themes? We could have as many layers of scale as we want, and it varies depending on the size of the organization and what their goals are. But you want to define what is that layer of scale and the hierarchy of that scale up front. Then you also start talking again about the scope of responsibility, and then the Jira configuration structure. How are those layers of scale set up in our projects? What is the data topology for our system, so that we're not, so that we have a good map of our data, so that we understand how we can build our integrations and our automated reporting. Then we can think about what our program and portfolio requirements are for the project and portfolio management systems. And what are our team level integrations and customizations that are needed? We don't want to lose our great DevOps capabilities or our automation capabilities to interact with other systems. We want to balance these best practices of keeping it simple, silly, with value-added reporting and all of that dependency management at all of the levels based on the organizational architecture. So let's go ahead and go into a demo, and I'll come back to these slides. So I'm going to hit escape here. Here is an example of a Confluence space that we have for our Atlassian governance board. And so you'll see right here on the landing page, we've got our mission statement and purpose, and then we've got what is our operating methods, what is our schedule and our agendas. And then we get down into who are the members, and we want to have our product admins, who are our governance board, who's the facilitator and the sponsor, and who are the voting members, and maybe even some advising committee members, and who are our admins. Then we want to also make sure that we're capturing what is the scope of our governance tools, and that just happens to be a great place to list what are our production links and our test environment links for those tools. And then when you look at this page tree here, you can see that I've got it broken down into 3 main sections. We've got our governance practices, our Atlassian administration, and our knowledge base. And in each of these are broken down, are 3 key categories. They might be documented elsewhere. You could do this in SharePoint, or you could have separate Confluence spaces for each of these. You might have what your Atlassian tools knowledge base might be its own space as well, your user guides. But let's look at what each of these contains. For example, in our knowledge base, we have our Jira configuration. This is our documentation about what's in our system. And so within our Jira configuration, we'll talk about what are the different project categories for our system, and what do each of those project categories look like. And we're not actually putting in all of the information, all of the configuration associated with them, but we are identifying and defining what this project is. So an enterprise project template is a Jira project template defined for the portfolio and enterprise leadership to track those themes and portfolio initiatives as issue types. Products are identified through the use of this custom field. And so we'll actually have template projects in our Jira system so that when any new enterprise projects are created, which hopefully with your organization, you typically only need 1 or 1 per business unit or 1 per country or whatever. You won't need a lot of these enterprise project categories, but some of the other categories you would. So you'll have a template project, and when you create new projects, you'll be creating them with shared schemes. So that way those schemes will be, when you update it for one, you're updating it for all of them. And that's why the governance board is making those decisions, and they're considering the change management associated with those changes. And so you'll have those there documented there. And then you'll have all of the information about what exactly those schemes are for that project category. So in this example, we have the issue type scheme and the workflow scheme. And notice we're following a certain naming convention for these schemas. And you'll document that for all of the different schema sets. And then you'll document any user details, any workflow details or custom field details or other details that are needed for the end user. You're not going to create all of the information about workflows and the different validators and conditions or automations that you're built, just the items that are really important for the end users to understand. So this is that handoff again between the admins and the end users. And so you have your different project categories documented here. And then below that, you're going to have a section that's got your Atlassian documentation and your videos. And it might also be some of the documentation from some of the vendors or marketplace applications. Atlassian provides a lot of great documentation and videos on how to use their systems. Same with many of the marketplace apps, such as Tempo or Easy Agile or Big Picture. AppFire, they all provide great documentation, and they have lots of YouTube channels that are available to teach people what is the best way to use their system. So you don't want to recreate the wheel and then have to maintain that. Let Atlassian maintain that documentation. However, you are going to have some information in your Jira best practices and in your Confluence best practices. Things like, what are our naming conventions for how we name our sprints? You might have, this is how we usually set up our advanced roadmaps with these kinds of views and with this type of configuration, and we use these fields for our start date and end dates. You might have guidance for how you set up your Jira structure, or how you set up your program boards, whatever it is that's specific to your organization. Like I said, don't recreate the wheel. Just give the guidance on how we do things at our company. In Confluence, you'll have your labels taxonomy. How are labels used in our Confluence? We know they're not controlled. They get out of control quite easily. So let's provide some guidance on what are the ways we use labels here. And what are our Confluence page templates that we've built for our company? Maybe we have templates that are around how we do estimates, or templates around how we do our demonstrations, or what kind of project reporting that we need for our executive leadership or for our project managers. Those Confluence page templates can be built, and then we can provide that guidance here as well. And so this is really your knowledge base information, your user guide, as well as your handoff between the admins and the end users. Then we have our Atlassian administration section, and this is where we'll have those naming conventions. What are our naming conventions for our company? And you might have a simple naming convention such as this, or you might have a more complex one that's with country codes or others. But make sure that your admins understand what the naming conventions are for their configuration and that they're following them. That way you know what has been defined for your Jira architecture and for your baseline of how your system operates. And the rest is just the old stuff that needs to be cleaned up. You'll have run books, and those run books might be how to create that new Jira project, or how do we provide access to new end users. And some of these run books might be handoffs to support, but some of them might be specifically for the administrators. Your change request model will also be documented. How do they request changes, and what are the practices that they need to follow? What are they want to do their testing in their sandbox environment, user acceptance testing, and then deployment scheduling, and what are the run books associated with that as well? And then your maintenance activities. What is our yearly housekeeping? What is our sandbox update plans? How do we grant access? Things like that. So all of your Atlassian administration can be captured in a single location. So that way, over the years, as people get promoted or win the lottery and move into different roles, that way, that information is handed off historically for the new admins. And then finally, we have our governance practices section. And this is where we will have things such as, what is our change request process? What is our support model? And what is our enablement training model? What is our communication planning model? You'll also have your Jira implementation guidance and best practices. This one here is something that's been captured from half a dozen or so consultants with decades, combined years of experience in these tools. And so we've captured all of these best practices of how to manage your administration access, using your database elements, things like status names and layout and design, issue types, custom fields, best practices associated with all of those different things. And then finally, we have our decision log. And our decision log is based on the Atlassian template for the DASI decision making, which includes the driver, approver, contributors, and informed model. And so what you're going to do with your DASI decision log here is you're going to make these hierarchy and other Jira architecture decisions early on while you're building your baseline. And then later it'll be used for change requests. But some of your early decisions will be, who are the people that have product access, our admins, as well as our end users, and how do we manage those? What is our Jira architecture, and what is the hierarchy associated with that, so that we can use it appropriately for our different system. Again, you might have 4 layers of scale, 5 layers, or maybe just 3 layers of scale, but you'll want to define that. Then your Jira project structure. What is our data topology for our system? Perhaps we're organizing our 5 layers of scale into a single Jira project, or we're breaking them out so that we have an enterprise level project category and a program product category project where the team level issues are used and they use team fields. And so that data topology is defining what our map looks like. What are our different program and team project categories? We're going to want to also think about our Jira service management project categories, as well as our workflow practices, especially our starting and ending practices. Are we going to have a common practice of having a single starting point that indicates draft and a dual ending workflow that is complete and canceled? Or do we want to use more than just one starting point? Or do we want to use a single ending point and use our resolutions to distinguish between those? And we'll think about all of the impacts of those. And then everything in between, of course, is really where we get into the project categories and the issue types, and those workflows can be defined appropriately. And then your global configuration settings, resolutions, link types, et cetera, all of the different schemes that need to be defined for these different project categories. All of these things are then built and the decisions are documented. And that way, as people are onboarded or leave, move on to different roles, all of this is captured for them. And then you'll be able to capture changes as they're requested and those decisions. Everybody will have full visibility, and this gets updated. You can order this based on the last modification date or whatever, but this is a common way to report up on these DASI logs. So that is my Confluence demonstration. I also wanted to show you that we do have something called an Atlassian Governance Bootcamp. And so if you wanted to go through a training on this, we offer this typically just for a private company for their actual governance board. And we walk them through how they manage their, why they care. We talk through the best practices, and then we actually walk through some exercises to define their hierarchy and their project structure, and some simple ones, look and feel. And so that would be a great class to take your entire governance board through to get them kicked off into the system. But we also can do, we're also looking at offering a public boot camp for that as well, where you could sign up and participate with other people from other companies. And rather than doing the governance activities, we'll actually do it with a made up company. Last time we did it with the Acme Anvils and Rockets, Mimi. So we had a lot of fun with that. Those of you who may not have watched the Roadrunner shows, that's what I'm referring to. So anyways, so getting back to the slides, let me just explain though that when it comes to Valiantis, we stand out because business acumen and empathy are forged together in a truly customer-centric approach. We really do have the values that we care about making every interaction meaningful and valuable to our customers. And that's why we offer things like this, our webinars for free, where I've shown you essentially how we go through a customer governance engagement. And so that is, we have our 5 core values, and we are truly committed to providing value at every interaction. So if you wanted to look at governance, we have, of course, our free webinar, but then we have a governance workshop, which is a boot camp for one day, or we can also do an engagement where we will walk you through, facilitate you through, help you stand up that governance board and start building out what your baseline is. My goal always is to enable you so that I can hand it off to you and you will continue to be successful even after I have stopped being involved. And then when it comes to Valiantis as a whole, when we work with other companies, we often see organizations that come to us for one-off solutions like that governance engagement, or they come to us for a specific training, for a migration or a consolidation, for a Jira service management type implementation. We also have managed services or various agility type engagements, like with a Jira line engagement or analytics. And so what we are now looking at is a strategic advisory engagement, which we're calling our value as a service. And that's where we can work with you to find what are the things that are necessary for you to get the most out of your tools and to enable your employees to be so powerfully effective in those tools that they don't really need to worry about those tools. Those tools are helping them instead. And so now we have Valiantis value as a service, one team, and this offering complete access to our whole company. So that way you can prioritize what needs to happen with the people that are providing that strategic consulting over time. First, we need to do our consolidation of our different systems. And now that we've had these acquisitions and so many different people companies coming together, we need to establish our new governance board over those systems. Maybe we want to look at training as well, or getting some new Jira service management in for our HR systems, and all of these different things. We can pull in the experts for those different areas to support you. So that's our webinar. Does anybody have any questions? Feel free to put them into the chat, in the Q&A or in the chat, and I'd be happy to take some questions. One of the most common questions I get is, what are the most common challenges that I've seen with standing up governance? And really, I would say that it comes down to traction and authority. That traction is really where you might get started, but you need to keep it going. You want to make sure that you have engaged representatives, people who care about making sure that they follow through to build the baseline and then maintain it. And then authority. They need to have that executive leadership, that sponsor who is truly saying, this is what we need. And so we will give them the authority to make the decisions. Sometimes those decisions are hard to communicate because there will be people that will sometimes resist change. And that's challenging. It's very hard. What we want to do is listen to those concerns, listen to them, and understand why they're struggling with that change, and try to understand the needs behind it so that we can address those needs. But that authority and traction are where things with governance sometimes fall apart. So those are things that I encourage you to think about. Who can give us the authority so that we can establish this governance, and who are the people that need to be involved so that we can continue to make good practice. I think there's a couple links that are being added to the chat, and that's for our training and events calendar. You'll see future webinars there, as well as all of the different classes that we offer. We have some great ones, such as AI powered productivity, a beginner's guide to Atlassian's AI. And we also have some new offerings like timesheets by tempo, quick start. That's a new offering in our training. So I encourage you to check that out. We also have a Valiantis YouTube channel that includes so many different videos. Pictured here is Vicky. Vicky does a great Jira Line updates video every time there's new updates on Jira Line. But we have all kinds of videos out there that you can check out, all kinds of free offerings from us, no charge required. So, and if you want to reach out to me, feel free to email me. My email's right there, or you can use your phone to connect with me on LinkedIn. Do we have any questions? All right. Well, that is our webinar for today, and I hope you got some value and learned something, and I will see you at the next webinar. Thanks.